Hello there and welcome to the Abundant Self podcast, a podcast where we talk about everything there is to learn and to know about what it truly means to have life and life in abundance. My name is Sharon Chebaibai and thank you so much for tuning in. Hello, happy new month and welcome to the Abundant Self podcast. This is episode 16 of the podcast, and today we are going to be talking about dealing with the enemy within, that is self-sabotage and every other thing, or rather all the things that are holding us back. So if this is your very first time here, karibu sana. Like I always like to say, I do hope and believe that by the time you finish listening to this episode, that you will have made a decision to be part of the Abundant Self community, and that yes, you will join us in this journey of walking and living a life of abundance. So yes, karibuni sana to the podcast. I hope you've had a lovely beginning of the month, a lovely beginning of April. We've had Easter going on, we've had Ramadan going on, and I hope that you and your family and your community, wherever it is that you are, even as you listen to this episode, that everything is going on well for you and with you. Yes, so in the previous episode, we were talking about putting ourselves out there and why it sucks. And the reason we decided to do this episode, actually, we did it as a recap episode. And basically what we were doing is just taking stock of how the first 3 months of the year has been for us. And the reason I decided to focus on putting myself out there and why it sucks is because when the year began, I was really focused on shooting my shot at life. And that is actually the very first episode that we did here on the podcast in the month of January, where we were talking about, why it is important for us as individuals to really put ourselves out there more, to really embrace our potential, embrace some of the many things that, help us to live a life of abundance, whether it is in terms of our career, in terms of our personal life, our relationships, our communities. Generally, what do we need to do to put ourselves out there more, to live a life of abundance more? And being that had been the focus for me, or rather still is the focus for me in 2023, I decided to just take stock and, share how that has been for me. And of course, if you listen to that episode, I shared that, putting myself out there has been brutal. It has been very uncomfortable. It has sucked a lot. But even still, there are so many things that I have learned, so many things that I am still unlearning. And I remember the key message, or rather the key lesson that I shared in that episode is that putting yourself out there may be uncomfortable. It may be brutal. It may suck. But trust me, it is very necessary. It is absolutely necessary for you to do so, for you to put yourself out there if you want to keep growing and to keep being the best version of yourself. So if you haven't listened to that episode yet, be sure to either press pause, go back and listen to episode 15, or you can finish listening to this episode and then after you're done, you can go back and listen to that episode. And like I always like to say, do not hesitate to share with me, what you think about the episodes. Share with me also, have you been putting yourself out there this year? Or rather, what have you been focusing on this year? What has been your goal? What have been the resolutions that you made? And, what are some of the progress that you're seeing? What are some of the things that you're learning even as the year continues to progress? So yes. Now on to today's episode. Like I said, we are going to be talking about dealing with the enemy within. And in this case, what we're talking about is self-sabotage and all the things that are holding us back from living a life of abundance, from living a full life. Now, I have been wanting to talk about this for a very long time here on the podcast. I had actually scheduled it in, for some time this year, but then it got accelerated, or rather, there was a catalyst that caused me to talk about this topic in this particular episode. And this is after I watched this Netflix film called Luther. I don't know if any of you has watched it. I think it's Luther, Fallen from the Sun. I cannot remember if that's the name, but I watched it recently, and it's because I had already been, seeing a lot of people talking about it. It had been on my recommended list for a long time. So I decided, okay, let me watch it and see what it's all about. So the film is starring Idris Elba, who is one of my favorite actors. And in this movie, my God, it is a very intense, it is a very, I can't even come up with the adjectives for this movie. But I remember watching this film, and at the back of my mind thinking about how, sometimes the things we see in movies, of course, they're not so far off from what is actually happening in real life. And I remember picking the underlying message from that film, or rather the underlying message for me that I got from that film, is that we all have secrets, we all have struggles, secret battles that we wish no one knew about, that could potentially lead to our downfall. Because in this film, I don't know if I want to give spoilers, but yes, actually, let me not give spoilers. Let me just say that is what I picked out from that movie, that we all have things that we are hiding from the world, whether it's our habits, whether it's secrets, whatever it is that, we do not want anyone to know about, that we do not want, them to be discovered, that could potentially lead to our downfall. And I remember even after watching that movie, I was even having this discussion with my friend. And later on, I kept asking myself, what are the things about my life that I do, whether they're consciously or subconsciously, that, are hindering me from living a full and abundant life? What are some of the things that I do? What are some of the things that I'm struggling with? What are the secret wars, secret battles that I have that are hindering me from living a full and abundant life? Yeah. And which then leads to the question of, how am I sabotaging my own success? How am I sabotaging my own dreams, my own potential, etc.? Now, I know that this has been said so many times before. This is something that we are constantly being told, that your biggest enemy is yourself, that, you are most of the time, we are the people who are holding ourselves back. But do we really understand what that means? And I know that is something that I really like to push for here in this podcast, where we're not just hopping onto some bandwagon where we're being told, you are the reason you're not succeeding, you are the reason you're failing, you're the reason this and this is happening. Yes, we are told that. Yes, we read that in books. Yes, we hear that from motivational speakers, from our communities, whatever it is you might want to call it. But do we really take the time to understand what that means when we say that we are potentially our biggest enemies, that we are potentially the people who are psychologically self-harming ourselves, where we do things that we know are not right for us, that are not right for our success, that are not right for our own well-being, whether it's mental well-being, spiritual well-being, emotional, whatever it is you might want to call it. Do we really understand what that means? And do we take the time to really uncover what that means for us as individuals? So this is actually the question that I have been asking myself this past week of, Chebaibai, what are the things that I'm doing? What are the secret battles? What are the secret wars that I have within myself that are hindering me from living a life of abundance? Most of the time, we find that, maybe it could be circumstances, it could be the environment that we have been conditioned to live in, whatever it is you might want to call it. So many times you might want to blame a lot of external factors that are hindering us from living a meaningful life. But then we fail to realize that even we ourselves, we also have a part to play in us not living a full life. Yeah, so I remember when I was thinking about this, for me, some of the things that kept cropping up, or some of the things that kept coming up rather, when it comes to self-sabotage, for me, number one is fear. And I mean, like I have been sharing even in the previous episode, is number one, the fear of putting myself out there, where I am not sure if I really want to show the world the kind of greatness that lies within me, where I'm not sure if I really want to, be known for what I do, where even if I'm introducing myself, I am afraid of saying, maybe I'm a podcaster or I'm a journalist, or, I just don't want people to know the kind of potential, the kind of greatness, the kind of magic and beauty that lies within me, because I am scared that, if I show this side of myself to the world, that, people will not accept me for who I am, that people will not see the greatness that I see in myself. Because sometimes, you find yourself in situations where you yourself know that, you are a great person, you're a talented person, but then you're afraid that if you're to share that talent, if you're to share that magic with the world, that people will not think of you as, either talented, as being good enough, as being good at what you do. And this could be because of a number of reasons. Maybe it could be childhood traumas, some other things that maybe you're dealing with that you have not come to terms with. So many things that we could talk about. But for me, number one has been, fear of putting myself out there, fear of failure, where I do not want to try anything out. And I think I even mentioned this in the very, very first episode of this podcast, where I was talking about how I took a very long time to start my podcast because, I was scared. Okay, there's so many great people out here. There's so many great podcasters out here, and I cannot possibly I cannot possibly have any value to add on to the great things that people are doing out here. So I was scared of starting. I was scared of, really just showing, or rather having my voice heard, because I did not want to fail. I did not want rejection. I mean, it's a constant fear and it's a constant struggle that I have within me, where every time I'm about to do something, every time I'm about to start something, I fear that, it's going to fail, that people are going to reject my ideas, people are going to reject, the dreams and, some of the thoughts and some of the ambitions that I have within me, as them not being good enough, as them not being worthy, when that may not even be true, right? And then just fear of the unknown. What is going to happen to me tomorrow? Do I have a future? Everything that I'm doing right now, is it really going to amount to anything? And this is something that I have been struggling with for a very long time, where, I could, for example, even with this podcast, even with the project that I'm doing, just constantly asking myself, so is this really going to amount to anything? Is my life amounting to anything right now? And now what that has caused, because for me, self-sabotage has mainly come from a place of fear. The underlying root cause has been fear, where, I am scared of, doing pretty much anything. I'm scared of putting myself out there. I'm scared of starting whatever it is. Fear has been the main thing for me, right? And, what that then has birthed is things like procrastination, where, for example, if I have a big presentation coming up, or for example, if I want to, even with this podcast, if I wanted to start a podcast or just start any project, because I fear that people are going to reject the idea, what I do is that I procrastinate, I push it off. I say, okay, I'll do it next month, or I'll start this next month. And then I find I have either wasted a whole year, I have wasted a lot of time just procrastinating because I am afraid, What this again has birthed, in the process, is a lot of negative self-talk, because you find that when you as an individual, self-sabotage manifests itself when, for example, you say you're going to do something and you know pretty well that whatever it is you want to do is actually going to be of benefit to you, is going to be of value to you, it's even going to be of value to the people around you, but then you don't do it. You know that you have to do this thing because it is going to be of value to you, to the people around you, but then you don't do it because, again, fear, again, so many other things. And then what happens is that, when you fail to do that thing and then someone else does it, or when, there are certain consequences that come after that, what do? You start, having a lot of negative self-criticism where you really beat yourself up. You're like, you're very lazy, this is why this and this doesn't work out for you. This is why things are not working out for you, because you do not do this. Just having a lot of negative self-talk. And this has been birthed again. The underlying root cause has been fear. And what does fear do? It makes me procrastinate. What then happens is that I start having a lot of negative self-talk, a lot of negative self-criticism. And I think that is usually something that very many people struggle with. I know that I'm not the only one, where you find the way you speak to yourself, the way you handle yourself. I mean, you would not want anyone, you would not even want anyone to talk to you like that. Or you would not even entertain someone who speaks to you like that. But then that is the same way you treat yourself, with a lot of negative self-talk, a lot of negative energy, just being too hard on yourself, when instead you could I think there's a place of acknowledging that this is an area you struggle with, and trying to, make progress, or trying to deal with the issue. How do I put this? There's a difference between acknowledging that you're struggling with something and, trying to work it out. And it's completely different when you're there putting yourself down, with the way you talk to yourself, with the way you handle yourself. And I think most of the time we talk about extending grace to others, whereas we could be extending that same grace, that same kindness, that same love to our own selves. Yeah. And then another thing that has been birthed out of self-sabotage, is having a low, self-opinion of myself, where, even the way I look at myself as an individual, the opinion that I have of myself is really, really low. Because when you self-sabotage for too long, or rather, when you keep repeating the same vicious cycles, the same things, especially when you do it consciously, when you know that what I am doing is actually going to harm me as an individual, what I am doing is going to hold me back from success. It's going to hold me back from living a meaningful life. When you do that, when it becomes a habit, because as human beings, we are creatures of habit, when it becomes something that you're constantly doing, then even how you see yourself as an individual, that is going to change, And what I'm being reminded of is this quote that says, when you're constantly being told a lie over and over again, it really becomes the truth. So where it gets to a point where you do not believe, or rather where you tell yourself that you cannot do something, when you tell yourself that you do not have the capacity, or you're not worthy of certain treatment, you're not worthy of success, you're not worthy of the good things that life has accorded to you, that God has accorded to you, then it becomes truth, it becomes reality for you. And that is absolutely not true. So how you see yourself, you see yourself as someone who is unworthy, you see yourself as someone who is even who is a failure, for example. You see yourself as someone who cannot get anything done, when that is not true, So self-sabotage for me has come from a place of fear, where I fear taking on certain responsibilities, where I'm constantly sitting in that fear of the unknown, fear of failure. And what that has led me to do is procrastinate a lot. It has led me to have, a lot of negative self-talk. And then now it has also affected even how I view myself as an individual, And, that really hinders us from living a life of abundance, because living a life of abundance, when you are there and you're thinking you're not deserving, or rather you can never make it, or, there's possibly, there are no opportunities for you. When that is how you view yourself, then how are you going to experience an abundant life? And I remember when you talk about abundant life, you're talking about living a life where you know that you're deserving of absolutely everything, every good thing that, God has predetermined for you, and knowing that you have everything that you need to live the life that God has called you to live, right? Just looking at life from a place of opportunity, not looking at it from a place of the things that you do not have. Looking at life from a place of, I can do this. Looking at life from a place of, there's so much value that I can add to this earth. Looking at life from a place of purpose where, I am here for a reason. There's a reason why God put me on this planet, and I cannot afford to sit pretty and do nothing, because living a life of abundance is not living life going through the motions where you just let life happen. It is actually living life intentionally, living life knowing that you have everything that you need, absolutely everything that you need. And that starts with your mindset. That starts with how you look at life, how you view yourself, how you even express yourself to your community, such like things. So another thing that has also come from a place of self-sabotage is, holding on to past mistakes, holding on to past failures, holding on to those things that, I have struggled with in the past, and not just moving on past them, not forgiving myself. Just sitting there, sitting in that failure, sitting in that mistake, not moving on from the things that you have, been pulled out of. Still thinking that, what, I'm still going to repeat. I am still going to go back and do the same thing. I'm still going to make the same mistake, when you have been given a second chance to actually be a better individual. Actually, that is it. Self-sabotage can also manifest itself in you not moving on from your past mistakes, not embracing the second chances that life has given you, but repeating the same old mistakes, repeating the same old things, the same old cycles that you know fully well that what I am doing is actually self-harming. Whether it's psychologically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, physically, whatever it is you might want to call it. So are we embracing the second chances that life has given us? Are we embracing the second chances that we get every morning when we wake up? And I always like to believe that when you wake up every morning, that is automatically a new chance for you to do things better, for you to live better. But self-sabotage comes in when we still go back to the same things that God has pulled us out of, when we go back to the same things that, life has taught us that, we do not need to be here. We are not meant to be here. Where you keep, pursuing a path that that this is not the path that I'm supposed to take. Being scared of living out your purpose. And I know that we have even talked about this in the previous episode on discovering purpose, where I shared that, very many of us, we cannot afford, actually. We believe that we cannot afford to live out our purposes. And so instead, what we do is that we spend life chasing after obligations, responsibilities, whether it's paying bills, whether it's doing this and that we forget that, that's not the reason why we were put on this planet. None of us was created to eat, sleep, pay bills, and die. We all have something great, something absolutely amazing that God has put in each and every one of us, something called purpose, that we are meant to live out in our lifetimes. And you find that most times we already know what our purpose is. We already know what God is calling us to do, but then we do not do it because we think we cannot afford to do that. If I do this, either you'll have to sacrifice something, you'll have to let go of a certain privilege that you have, whatever it is you might want to call it. That is self-sabotage. Self-sabotage is actually going against or rather living against the purpose, or rather what God has called you to be, what God has called you to live, the kind of life that God has called you to live. And this reminds me of this verse, I think it's in Romans, where Paul is talking about how, the good that he wants to do, he is not doing it. Instead, the evil, or rather the bad thing that he does not want to do, that is the thing he ends up doing. As human beings, we find ourselves in that kind of scenario, in that kind of situation where we know this is what I am meant to be doing. I am not supposed to be doing this, but then we do it. We find ourselves doing those very things. We find ourselves fighting a lot of secret battles, a lot of secret wars within ourselves that we know for a fact may lead to our own downfall. Because what happens when we go against ourselves? Of course, there are going to be consequences. What happens when we go against the very nature, against the very purpose, against the very reason of living, of existence that God has put within us? Of course, there are going to be a lot of consequences. Living an unfulfilling life, having a lot of mental health issues, a lot of, there's just a lot of consequences that come from going against our true nature. And our true nature, how do we know our true nature? Of course, it's by understanding what God has put in each and every one of us. It's understanding the reason as to why we have been placed on this earth. Because if you're like me, then you know that you were not just born to just live out a certain lifetime and then die to make room for other people again to come. I mean, that sounds like a trap. That sounds like a huge trap, But as human beings, we are scared. We are scared of living out an abundant life. Actually, yes, we are. It's like we are scared of living a full life, and yet that is what we want. We want to live a full life. We want to live an abundant life. But then we are scared of doing exactly that. And so what do? We self-sabotage. We do the very things that we know are hindering us from living the kind of life that we want because of fear. For me, that is what has been, the truth, or rather the reality for my life, where I have found myself doing things that I'm not supposed to be doing, entertaining mindsets that I'm not supposed to be entertaining habits that I'm not supposed to be entertaining because of fear. Knowing fully well that these are the very things that are going to hinder me from living an abundant life. But you see, the worst thing about that, or the danger in that, is that none of us knows when, our time on this planet is going to be done. So are we really going to be living from a point of fear all our lives? Where we self-sabotage, where we are not ready to really challenge, we're not really ready to confront and face some of these things that are hindering us from living a life of abundance. And like I said, when it comes to self-sabotage, in order to know, am I self-sabotaging? It's asking yourself, what does living an abundant life mean to you? What does it mean to live a meaningful life? What does living a meaningful, fulfilling life mean to you? And then now look at your life. What you are doing, does it reflect the definition that you have for living an abundant life? Like I said, for me, living an abundant life means living with an open mind and an open heart, knowing that everything and all things are possible, right? It's living fearlessly and anchored in the belief that each of us, anchored in the belief that I have a God-given purpose that I must fulfill. Living an abundant life for me means understanding that I am where I am for a reason, and it's up to me to let God use me and move through me. Because self-sabotaging also manifests itself when, you refuse to let God use you. You refuse. I mean, It just brings me to the story of Moses. I don't know if Moses was self-sabotaging, but literally he had one job. He was told, you need to my children have been crying out for me. They have been going through a lot of oppression, and I need you to be the one to help me rescue my children from their oppressors. And then Moses is like, no, I'm a stammerer, not being willing, because already what you're looking at that particular point, all he was looking at is the things that he did not have, in the ways he was inadequate, in the ways he believed he could not possibly get the job done right. But who says he couldn't? At that particular point, God was not even thinking about all that. God had already factored in the fact that he was a stammerer. God had already factored in the fact that maybe he did not feel that confident. He did not have that boldness maybe that he needed to go back to Egypt and get, the Israelites from, to rescue the Israelites from the oppression that was happening at the time. God already knew all that. And see, when we when we resist the hand of God moving in our lives, it is self-sabotage. When we resist God's help, when we resist God's word, when we resist being used of God, when every one of us, and I know I even mentioned this in the episode on purpose. So I was talking about, you might not know what your purpose is, but you always have this innate feeling, you always have this desire to either change something or have something done differently. That could be tied to your purpose. And then you find this is something that is constantly bothering you. This is something that you believe it is up to you to change, but then you resist. You resist that inner push. You resist that nudging. Whatever it is you might want to call it, because you're scared, because you believe you're inadequate, because you believe you do not have what it takes. That is self-sabotage, and we do that a lot of times. Right? So living an abundant life means also understanding that you are where you are for a reason. Where you are right now, I don't know what that looks like for you, but where you are right now, that is for a reason. And God never wastes any opportunities or any experiences. He does not do that. Actually, everything in our lives, when God says that all things work out for the good of those who love him and those who have been called according to his purpose, it means everything, the good and the bad, all of that are going to work together for your good. So you are there for a reason. You are where you are for a reason. And when it comes to living an abundant life, you have to be able to just surrender and be willing to be used of God, to allow God to move through you, through your purpose, through your God-given abilities, whatever it is that you might want to call it. So think about it. What is your definition of living an abundant life? What does it mean for you to live a full life, to live a meaningful life? Now sit down and just look at some of the things, or some of the, how your life looks like. Just take a back seat, or just take a step back and look at your life. Do you believe that what you are doing right now, or rather the way you are living your life right now, is it helping you to live that life? Right? And what are some of the things? What are some of the things that are hindering you from getting there? Is it your habits? Is it your mindsets? What secret wars are you battling with? What is that enemy that is within you? That you're constantly in war with, that is hindering you from living this abundant life? What are some of the ways that you self-sabotage? Right? And so how do we move past self-sabotage and all the things that are holding us back? One of the things that I have come to learn about life is that it is very important for us to always know why we do what we do. And this is something that has really been hitting hard for me. Like, why am I doing this? Why do I have to do this podcast? Why am I doing this podcast? Why am I taking on a certain course of action? Why do I need to show up to work every morning? Why am I taking on a certain habit? Why am I taking on a certain mindset? When it comes to life, I think it is very important to always know why we do what we do as human beings. And so it's the same thing when it comes to moving on past self-sabotage. It's just answering that one question, why? Why are you self-sabotaging? Right? What is the underlying root cause? What is the root cause? For me, like I shared, my main underlying issue has been fear. And fear has led to procrastination. It has led to negative self-talk. It has led me to have a low opinion of myself. It has led me to even sit tight, or rather keep holding on to my past mistakes, past failures, those instances when I wasn't the best version of myself. That is how self-sabotage has manifested itself. Fear, for me. So when you understand, like I said, when you look at your life and you look at what you believe your life should be, when you define what living a meaningful life means to you, and you look at how you've been living your life, it's just asking yourself, why? Why am I doing this? Why am I not going after the very things I said I wanted to go after? Why am I stuck in the very same habits, in this very same mindsets that are hindering me from living an abundant life? Why do I keep entertaining the same circles? Why do I keep entertaining the same cycles, Why do I keep entertaining the same kind of community, whatever it is you might want to call it? Why do you do the things that you do? Once you figure out that root cause, once you figure out the why, then now you can think about what do you need to do then? Now that you know why you are stuck in a certain mindset, why you are stuck in a certain habit, why you are stuck doing a certain thing, why you're stuck self-sabotaging, then you can go ahead and ask yourself, what do I need to do to move past this? And for me, something that has really been helpful for me is community and fellowship. And having a support system that is always and intentionally asking me, the tough and the difficult questions that really force me to wake up and embrace the life God intends, or the life God has intended for me. Just having those people whom I can talk to and they're not afraid to call me out and tell me, Chebaibai, is this really the kind of person you want to be? Then why are you doing this? And knowing that even as they're calling me out from a place of love, from a place of patience, from a place of wanting to see me grow, wanting to see me be the best version of myself. So that is something that has really helped me just move past self-sabotage. I'm not saying that I have completely moved past it, because sometimes I still find myself doing things that I know for a fact I should not be doing this. I should not be doing this, But just constantly having that consistent fellowship with the right people, the right community, people whom I can share these secret battles with, people who can ask me the questions that maybe I am too afraid of asking myself. And sometimes you may find that it could even be hard for you to understand why. But when you talk to someone, when you have a support system, even if you want to seek professional help, for example, when you just have this conversation with someone, when you have an accountability partner and you seek to understand some of these reasons, you find it's easier for you to really, I don't know if I want to call it confront them. It's easy for you to face these reasons, to face these root causes. But for me, community has really played a big role in helping me understand why I do the things that I do and helping me to just learn how to move past this. having someone who is calling you out constantly, having someone who is not afraid to tell you that what you're doing is not right, and being ready, being vulnerable, being open enough to receive that love. Because it is love when you are there and someone is trying to help you be the best version of yourself, even if maybe it is in an uncomfortable setting. Because every time we have to challenge these reasons, every time we ask ourselves why, it's also thinking about, are we really ready to face that enemy within? Sometimes you don't even know what that enemy is, by the way. Sometimes you find that you're doing, there's a pattern to the way you live your life. And of course, when you want to go ahead and think about why you're doing it, you may not really know it, but sometimes it's because you're really scared to find out what it is, the reason why you are who you are, or the reason why you do the things you do, right? So are you ready to face that enemy within? I think, that is actually the question you should be asking yourself when it comes to self-sabotage, when it comes to, challenging and confronting the things that are holding you back from living a life of abundance. Are you ready to face that enemy? Are you ready to come face to face with the underlying root cause? Because most of the time you find, you're trying to heal symptoms, you're trying to maybe heal procrastination, you're trying really hard to stop procrastinating, but you don't really understand, okay, why am I procrastinating? You're trying really hard to not either go back to a certain habit, to change a certain habit, when you should be asking yourself, why am I stuck in this habit? What led me here? So are you ready to face that enemy within? And I mean, it's a very difficult question, because even I, for example, maybe fear is not the root cause of why I'm self-sabotaging. Maybe it's something else. Maybe it's a trauma that I am not ready or have not yet healed from. Am I ready to face that trauma? Right? Like I said, we are creatures of habit. Most of the time, our lives are, manifest themselves in patterns, how we do things, how we even exist among other people, how we do, our lives, whatever it is you might want to call it. But most of the time, there's usually a pattern to the way we do things. And that pattern has got to have been informed by something. It could be something good, could be something bad. But it's just asking ourselves, are we ready to face that enemy? Are you ready to deal with the enemy within? What is the reason? Why are you self-sabotaging? Why are you going against yourself? Why are you going against your purpose? Why are you not ready to live a meaningful life? Actually, you could be ready to live a meaningful life, but the question is, why don't you want to embrace it fully? And another thing, of course, that I always like to say is, how am I going to, or rather, how do I move past self-sabotage? I think it's just simply also seeking the help of my creator, Something that I've really come to appreciate is that I do not exist on my own in this world, and I did not just come out of nowhere. Someone put me here. And without him, I also cease to exist, Someone put me here, so without him, I am nothing. I do not exist. And so he knows my secret battles. He knows me inside out. He is aware of every single thing, every single secret, every single struggle that I am hiding from the world. He knows that. I always like to say that if there's one person you can never hide from, is God. Literally, you can run and hide everywhere. You can literally go to the ends of the world, ends of the earth, to try and hide from God, but he will still be there. He will still be there, So just knowing that I am nothing without my creator, knowing that I cease to exist without him, knowing that he knows me inside out, he knows every single secret battle that I am struggling with, every single one that is keeping me from, living a meaningful life. Knowing that has helped me to also know that I can confidently, as the word of God says, I can confidently approach the throne of grace with confidence, knowing that there I will find mercy, there I will find grace to find help in times of need. Right? Because, what else can I say? How do you move past self-sabotage? Yes, you want to understand why you do what you do. You want to understand what you need to do to move past it. But you also need to just seek help from your Creator. Yeah, it just boils down to that. Just seeking help from Him. Just trying to understand, okay, God, what does it mean for me to live an abundant life? Help me get there. Help me get rid of, all these things that are hindering me from living the life that you've intended me to live. Help me heal, or rather heal me from the traumas, from the secret battles, whatever it is that is hindering me from living that life of abundance. So what are some of the things that you do that are working against you, that are working against the kind of person that you're meant to be? Think about all those things. And there's a quote that I came up with while I was preparing for this episode by a guy called Craig Lunsbrough that says that more times than I can remember, I look around and I ask why the hole I'm in looks so strangely familiar. And he goes ahead to say that it's probably because it looks a whole lot like all the other ones I dug before I got around to digging this one. I'll read that again. More times than I can remember, I look around and I ask why the hole I am in looks so strangely familiar. Probably because it looks a whole lot like all the other ones I dug before I got around to digging this one. So what are some of the holes that you're digging up for yourself, where you find yourself in a situation where you should not have been here? And that situation looks so strangely familiar because it's something you've done before, right? This is a pattern that is, common with who you are as an individual. What are some of the habits? What are some of the mindsets? The holes that you're digging for yourself that are familiar, and why are you digging those holes? If that is making sense, right? So just ask yourself, what are some of the self-sabotaging habits that are holding you back from living a full life? What are some of the secret battles that you're struggling with, and how are you dealing with the enemy within? Are you dealing with that enemy by, just self-sabotaging even more? Because sometimes you find that we deal with our problems by causing even more problems for ourselves. By having a lot of unhealthy coping mechanisms or having a lot of unhealthy habits where we think we are trying to help ourselves, where we think, we are trying to make things better for ourselves, when we are only just throwing ourselves from the frying pan and into the fire. So those are the two questions for today. What are some of the self-sabotaging habits that are holding you back from living a full life? And of course, go ahead and also ask yourself, what does living a full life mean to you? Then you can also go ahead and ask yourself, what are some of the secret battles that you're struggling with? And how are you dealing with the enemy within? And I'm also going to invite you to go and watch the movie Luther from Netflix. It might be a bit dark, I don't know, but it's really going to cause you to think a lot about some of the things, some of the secret battles, some of the very many things that we do as human beings. Like I said, it could be from a place of trying to deal with the enemy within, but then we find ourselves just really digging the grave even deeper and deeper for ourselves. right? It really caused me to think a lot about some of the secret battles that I have within me. Even the things that, you don't want anyone to know about. You wish no one knew that you were doing this thing. Or you wish, you would stop doing it. Whatever it is you might want to call it. We have a lot of secret battles that we have within ourselves. And these are the very things that are hindering us from living an abundant life, from living a full life. Because you're constantly looking over our shoulder, thinking that, life is out to get us, people are out to get us, that nothing will ever go well for us. But, there's a freedom, I believe, in just discovering what these issues are, discovering what this enemy is, coming face to face with this enemy and just being ready to deal with it, being ready to face it, being ready to confront it in a healthy way and in a way that pushes you to live a life of abundance, to live a full life. So yes, that is pretty much it for today's episode. I hope that you have learned a thing or two. Be sure to let me know what you think about today's episode. You can also either chat me on WhatsApp, chat me on Instagram, chat me even on the voice message link that we have in the show notes, and let me know what have you been thinking about, or rather what are some of the things that this episode has caused you to think about. What are some of the things that you believe you even want us to keep talking about here on the podcast. Like I like to say, I do not have all the answers to these things, but I think just coming on here and speaking about certain topics or even certain things, even like, self-sabotage, also causes me to go back and look at my life, to go back and, try and discover what are some of the things that are hindering me from living a life of abundance. Causes me to just also ask myself, have I dealt with the enemy within? So be sure to let me know what you think about this episode. And of course, go ahead and listen to our previous episodes as well. So far, we've done an episode on shooting your shot at life. We've done an episode on self-love, understanding self-love, the pitfalls of self-love. We've done an episode on discovering your purpose. And we've also done an episode on putting yourself out there and why it sucks. And a whole lot of other episodes that we have done since last year. So be sure to listen to our previous episodes. And of course, be sure to also engage and follow us on our social media. That is on Facebook and Instagram and on Twitter. On Facebook at The Abundant Self, on Instagram at The Abundant Self _podcast, and on Twitter at The Abundant Self Podcast. Be sure to also follow, rate, and review us from wherever you get your podcasts. Remember that The Abundant Self Podcast is currently available on all listening platforms. We are on Spotify, we are on Apple Podcasts, we are on Google Podcasts, we are on AfriPods, on Castbox, Stitcher, pretty much everywhere you get your podcast. So be sure to follow, rate, and review us. And be sure to always, let me know what you think about the episodes. Let me know how, of course, we can even keep doing this better, how I can keep showing up for you through these episodes, through this podcast. And like I always like to say, if you remember absolutely nothing else from today's episode, I hope you remember that you have been called to have life and have it more abundantly, and that I am rooting for you. Until the next one, bye-bye.